the silent storm before the words. The night was quiet. But inside the large hall, hundreds of people sat with restless hearts. The lights above glowed softly, painting the stage in a golden shade. It was an event meant to celebrate kindness and resilience, a gathering where voices of respect and humility filled the air. Yet in the middle of all this, no one could have guessed that something far greater than speeches or awards was about to happen. Something so personal, so unexpected, that it would freeze time for everyone who was present. Keanu Reeves sat quietly in the front row, dressed in his usual simple clothes that made him appear both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. He was known for his silence, for being the kind of man who never tried to steal the spotlight. But behind his calm face, there was a storm of emotions. For many years, he had carried feelings inside his heart that he never dared to speak aloud. Feelings that belonged to one person only, Sandra Bullock. Sandra sat a few seats away from him, her smile gentle, her eyes glowing with warmth as she greeted people who walked past. She looked graceful and strong, but those who truly knew her could see the tiny shadows behind her smile, the quiet battles she fought in her own heart. She had always respected Keanu deeply, yet she never once imagined what he was holding inside. The evening began with speeches, one after another. People clapped, laughed, and sometimes even cried as stories of resilience and kindness filled the hall. But every word spoken on that stage only pulled Keanu deeper into his own thoughts. He listened, but his mind was somewhere else. He remembered the first time he met Sandra on a film set, the way her laughter carried hope into even the darkest of days. He remembered moments when they sat together after long hours, sharing stories that no one else would ever know. His heart told him that the time had come. He could not remain silent forever. Silence had been his companion, but silence had also been his prison. And now, surrounded by hundreds of people, he felt a strange courage rising inside him. The host called Keanu's name. The audience clapped loudly as he slowly walked toward the stage. His steps were steady, yet his heart was pounding as if each beat shook the earth beneath him. When he stood before the microphone, the hall fell silent. Everyone expected him to give a speech about kindness or resilience, but no one expected the storm he was about to release. "Thank you," Keanu began softly, his voice calm yet heavy with emotion. "I came here tonight to speak about respect, about humility, and about kindness. But as I stand here, I realize there is something even more important than words. It is the courage to tell the truth, even when it scares you." The audience leaned closer. His eyes moved across the hall, then stopped where Sandra sat. For a moment, the world seemed to blur, and only her face was clear. Keanu took a deep breath. "For many years, I have kept something in my heart. I have chosen silence again and again, but tonight, in front of everyone, I cannot hide anymore." A whisper passed through the audience, like a wave moving through the sea. Sandra's eyes widened slightly, her hand tightening around the armrest of her chair. She could feel that something life-changing was about to be spoken. "Sandra," Keanu said, his voice breaking through the silence like a fragile yet powerful flame. "I have carried love for you in my heart for so long. I have admired your strength, your kindness, your resilience. I have seen the way you face the world with courage, and tonight, I want to tell you, I love you." The words fell into the hall like thunder in a quiet valley. People gasped, some covered their mouths, others stared in complete shock. Sandra froze, her heart racing as her eyes locked with his. The hall was filled with silence, yet inside that silence, emotions screamed louder than any sound. Keanu's face remained calm, but his eyes carried years of hidden truth. Sandra's lips trembled as she tried to process what she had just heard. For years, She had wondered if there was something unspoken between them, moments that felt deeper than friendship, glances that lasted longer than they should have. But she never expected him to speak it, and certainly not here, not like this, in front of everyone. The audience waited, holding their breath. Sandra slowly stood up, her legs shaking as she rose. She looked at Keanu, her eyes filled with both tears and disbelief. For the first time in the evening, no one clapped, no one spoke, no one moved. Every soul in the room was trapped between the storm of love and the silence of fear. Would she walk away? Would she answer with rejection? Or would she step into the fire of truth that Keanu had lit with his words? The hall waited. The world waited. And in that moment, the story truly began. The weight of silence and the echo of love, the hall remained frozen after Keanu's confession. People stared at him as if they had just witnessed history. The sound of his words still echoed in their minds, refusing to fade. Sandra stood there, her face pale yet glowing with an emotion that no one could describe. Her hands trembled slightly, and for a long moment she said nothing. This silence was heavier than thunder. The audience leaned forward, waiting for her to speak. It was not just curiosity anymore. It was a need, almost like they were all tied to her answer. The night had turned into something no one had prepared for. Keanu remained calm on the stage, but inside, his heart was breaking with every passing second. He wondered if he had done the right thing. He wondered if confessing in front of the world was a mistake. But there was also a small flame inside him that whispered, "Truth is never a mistake." The host of the event stood still, unsure of what to do. The staff in the back exchanged nervous looks. Some whispered softly, others shook their heads, but no one dared to interrupt. This moment was bigger than the event itself. Then Sandra finally moved. She took a step forward, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She looked up at Keanu, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice so soft that only those closest could hear, yet somehow it reached every ear in the room. The hall tightened with tension. Her heart was in chaos. For years, she had felt something for him too, something unspoken, something locked away behind walls of fear and doubt. But her life had been full of unexpected turns, heartbreaks, and unanswered questions. She was scared to open a new door, especially one that carried so much weight. She remembered their times together, the laughter they shared on film sets, the quiet talks during long nights, the respect they always gave each other. She had always admired how humble he was, how he never let fame change his heart. And in the secret corners of her heart, she had always wondered what it would feel like if they were more than friends. But to hear him speak it aloud in front of everyone shook her to the core. The crowd was still waiting. Some were smiling, some had tears in their eyes, and some were biting their lips with nervousness. It was as if the entire hall was holding its breath together. Sandra finally lifted her head, and with trembling lips, she spoke louder. You don't understand what this means, Keanu." The words sent a ripple through the hall. Was this rejection? Or was it the beginning of something deeper? Keanu's eyes softened. "Then help me understand," he said gently, his voice carrying a mixture of courage and vulnerability. The audience gasped again. It was rare to see such raw honesty from a man who was always known for his silence. Sandra stepped closer to the stage. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might give out. She wanted to tell him everything, that she had loved him quietly too, that she had carried his kindness in her heart like a secret light. But she was afraid of what the world would say, afraid of the pain that love sometimes carried. Her voice broke. "I'm scared," she admitted. Those words pierced the silence deeper than anything else. They were not dramatic. They were simple, but real. Everyone in the hall felt the truth inside them. Because who among them had never been scared of love? Keanu's eyes filled with warmth. He did not move closer. He did not try to force an answer. He simply stood, strong and calm, allowing her the space to breathe. "We are all scared," he said softly. "But sometimes love is the only thing worth being brave for." Tears welled up in Sandra's eyes. Her hands shook, but she covered her mouth to stop the sob that was rising. The hall was no longer just an audience. They had become witnesses of something fragile, something human, something that touched the deepest corners of their own hearts. And then, from somewhere in the back, someone began to clap. It was a hesitant clap at first, unsure if it was the right thing to do. But then another person joined, and another. Soon, the hall was filled with the sound of clapping, loud and echoing, rising like a wave of support. The applause was not just for Keanu. It was for the courage of truth, for the beauty of vulnerability, for the reminder that even those who seem strongest are human at their core. Sandra looked around, shocked at how the audience was reacting. She thought they might judge, that they might whisper cruel things, but instead they were cheering, lifting her heart higher than she expected. She looked back at Keanu, and in that moment, she felt the weight of years fall from her shoulders. She realized she did not have to carry her fear alone. But just as she was about to answer him, just as her lips parted to speak, something unexpected happened. The lights in the hall flickered. The sound system cracked for a second. People gasped, in surprise. The applause stopped as quickly as it began. Everyone looked around, confused, and then from the far side of the hall, a voice shouted, "Don't do it, Sandra!" The hall turned in shock. A man had stood up, his face hidden in the shadows of the corner. His voice was loud, filled with anger and desperation. Keanu froze. Sandra's breath caught in her throat. Who was this man? Why was he here? And what did he mean? The storm that had just begun was about to grow far darker, and the night was far from over. The stranger's voice and the shadow of doubt. The entire hall froze as the man's voice echoed from the corner. "Don't do it, Sandra!" he had shouted, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. People turned their heads, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Who was he? Why was he speaking at such a delicate moment? Sandra's face turned pale. Her body stiffened as though her past had suddenly walked into the room. Keanu remained calm on the outside, but inside, his heart tightened. The confession he had just spoken with so much courage was now hanging by a thread, threatened by this mysterious stranger. The man stepped forward slowly. His face came into the light, and everyone gasped. He was not a random stranger. He was someone Sandra had known before, someone from her past. "Michael," Sandra whispered, her voice trembling. The hall erupted in whispers. People leaned into each other, trying to understand. Michael was Sandra's old friend. Some even knew him as someone she once trusted deeply, but no one expected him to appear here, at this moment, when her entire life seemed to be standing on the edge of change. "You cannot trust him," Michael said loudly, pointing at Keanu. "He will hurt you, Sandra. He will leave you broken." The room fell into a thick silence again. Every eye turned back to Keanu, waiting for his reaction. But Keanu did not explode with anger. He did not shout back. Instead, he looked at Michael with calm eyes and said, "Why do you believe that?" His voice was steady, not defensive, not proud, just calm. Michael laughed bitterly. "Because I know you, Keanu. The world calls you humble, kind, respectful. But I see the truth. You live in silence, in shadows, and you carry pain so deep that it will spill onto anyone who stands close. Sandra deserves more than that." His words cut through the hall. Some people nodded quietly, uncertain. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Sandra's heart was beating so fast she thought she might collapse. She remembered Michael from years ago, how he had once stood by her in her darkest times. She owed him trust, but she also knew that he carried bitterness, scars that never healed. Keanu's face softened. "Michael," he said gently, "you are right about one thing. I do carry pain. I have lived through loneliness, loss, and silence. But the truth is, pain has not destroyed me. It has taught me. It has taught me that love is not about being perfect. It is about being present. And if I love Sandra, it means I will stand with her in her light and in her darkness." His words sent chills through the hall. Many people's eyes filled with tears, but Michael shook his head furiously. "Words! Nothing but words! Sandra, don't believe him. I've seen people like him. They act humble, but deep down, they will choose themselves before they ever choose you." Sandra looked at Michael, then at Keanu. Her heart was splitting in two. The man she once trusted was pulling her into fear. But the man she had always admired was pulling her into hope. "Stop," she whispered, but her voice was drowned by the tension in the hall. Keanu looked directly into her eyes. "Sandra, I'm not here to prove myself to the world. I am here to tell you the truth. I love you. Nothing Michael says can erase that. But the choice is yours. I will not force it. Love must be free, or it is not love at all." The hall grew quiet again. People leaned forward as if they were watching the most important moment of their lives. Sandra closed her eyes for a second. Her memories flashed in front of her, the times she laughed with Keanu, the times she wondered what could have been, the kindness he showed not only to her but to strangers, to everyone. She remembered him giving up his seat for someone tired, helping crew members quietly, never once acting above anyone. But then Michael's words echoed in her head, reminding her of the risk, the fear of heartbreak. The room seemed to shrink around her. She felt everyone's eyes pressing on her shoulders, waiting, demanding an answer. Her lips parted. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice trembling. And then something happened that no one expected. A woman from the audience stood up. She was elderly, with silver hair and kind eyes. Her voice carried softly yet powerfully as she spoke. "Child, do not let fear decide for you. Fear steals love before it even begins. I have lived long enough to know that silence kills the heart more than heartbreak ever will." The hall turned to her. Her words seemed to fall like a blessing, gentle but undeniable. Sandra's tears spilled down her cheeks. She looked back, at Keanu, then at Michael. Her heart felt heavy, but also strangely light. She took one slow step toward the stage. The crowd gasped. Michael's eyes widened in anger. Keanu's breath caught in his throat, but he stood still, letting her choose. She took another step, and another, until she stood at the foot of the stage looking up at Keanu. Her lips trembled, but there was a faint smile beneath her tears. The hall was silent again. Every heartbeat in the room seemed to pause. Sandra finally whispered, her voice breaking but full of truth. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I don't know if this love will heal me or hurt me. But I know one thing, Keanu. I cannot walk away anymore." The hall erupted. Some clapped, some cried, some shouted, in disbelief. Keanu's eyes filled with tears for the first time. His lips curved into the softest smile, a smile that carried years of silence breaking apart. But before he could take her hand, Michael's voice thundered again. "You will regret this, Sandra. Mark my words." His face was twisted with rage, and his eyes burned with something dangerous. For the first time that night, the hall no longer felt safe. When love faces the storm, the hall was filled with chaos after Michael's furious words. People whispered loudly, some gasped, some even stood up in shock. The event that was supposed to celebrate kindness had now turned into something unforgettable, a battlefield between love, fear, and anger. Sandra's heart was pounding as she stood at the foot of the stage, looking up at Keanu. She had finally spoken her truth, but Michael's shadow was now hanging over both of them. She could see the pain in Michael's eyes, but also the rage that was consuming him. "Michael, stop," Sandra said softly, her voice trembling. "This is not the way." But Michael's face twisted in bitterness. "Not the way? Sandra, you know what you're doing? You're throwing away years of trust for a man who hides behind silence. He will break you. I cannot let you make this mistake." His words cut deep. Some in the audience nodded. Others shook their heads. But no one dared to move. Everyone wanted to know how this would end. Keanu finally spoke, his voice calm yet strong. "Michael, I understand your fear. I know you care for Sandra, but love cannot be forced, and it cannot be protected by anger. If you truly care for her, you must let her choose her own path." The hall fell into silence again. Keanu's words carried humility and truth. But Michael's eyes burned with something far darker than concern. Sandra looked torn. She felt like she was standing on a thin line between two worlds, one where love could blossom and one where fear would chain her forever. Then suddenly Michael stepped forward. His voice rose louder, filled with desperation. "No, you don't deserve her, Keanu. You think you are some kind of savior, but I see you clearly. You will leave her like you leave everything else. She belongs with someone who will fight for her, not someone who hides behind calm words." His voice cracked like thunder in the hall. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some gasped, others muttered, but all eyes remained locked on the three of them. Sandra's hands trembled, her breath shallow. She whispered, "This isn't you, Michael. You were never like this." Michael turned to her with tears in his eyes. "I loved you, Sandra. I loved you long before he ever appeared. But you never saw me. You never looked at me the way you look at him." His confession sent shockwaves across the hall. People gasped again. Sandra's heart broke at the rawness of his words. She had always seen Michael as a friend, someone who supported her, but she never realized the depth of his hidden feelings. "Michael," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you." But his pain had already turned into something dangerous. His fists clenched as his voice hardened. "Then don't hurt me now. Walk away from him. Walk away before it is too late." Keanu looked at Michael, then at Sandra. His face was calm, but his eyes showed deep sadness. "Sandra, the choice is yours. I will not fight him. I will not turn this into a war. Love must never become violence." His humility struck the audience. Many people nodded, tears forming in their eyes. His words reminded them of the truth. They were not just witnessing drama. They were witnessing a man who valued respect above pride. Sandra closed her eyes for a moment. She could feel the weight of the entire hall pressing on her. Every heartbeat in the room seemed to belong to her. Then, with trembling hands, she stepped onto the stage. Slowly, she walked toward Keanu. The hall gasped. Michael's face turned pale, then twisted into fury. "No, don't you dare!" he shouted, his voice echoing like a storm. The staff moved nervously, unsure if they should step in. The audience froze, afraid of what might happen next. Sandra reached Keanu's side. She looked into his eyes, and through her tears, she smiled faintly. "I choose not to run anymore," she whispered. Keanu's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't move closer. He simply whispered back, "Then we will face whatever comes together." The hall erupted in applause, louder than before. People clapped, some even stood, cheering for the courage they had just witnessed. The noise shook the hall like a wave of thunder. But amidst the applause, Michael's rage boiled over. He raised his hands and shouted over the noise, his voice filled with bitterness. "You will regret this! Both of you!" The applause faltered as people turned to him. His face was red, his eyes wild, and his voice trembling with pain. Security began moving toward him, but Sandra raised her hand. "Stop," she said softly, her voice filled with both kindness and authority. The guards hesitated. Sandra turned to Michael, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you, Michael. You were my friend, and you were important to me. But love cannot be forced. Please, let go of this anger before it destroys you." Her words carried a power that silence could not. The hall grew still, again, watching the broken man in front of them. For a brief second, Michael's face softened. His eyes glistened with tears. But then, as quickly as it came, the softness vanished, and the darkness returned. He shook his head violently. "No, no, you've chosen wrong. You'll see. One day, you'll realize I was right." And with that, he turned and stormed out of the hall. The heavy doors slammed shut behind him, leaving behind an echo that chilled every heart. Sandra collapsed slightly against Keanu's arm, her body trembling. He gently steadied her, his calm presence like a shield against the storm. The hall, still filled with tension, slowly erupted again, not with fear this time, but with applause. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, crying. They were not just clapping for love, but for courage. For the reminder that kindness and truth must always stand even when storms threaten to tear them apart. But deep in her heart, Sandra knew this was not the end. Michael's eyes had promised something dangerous, and sometimes the greatest storms come after the silence. The return of silence and the promise of storms, the hall slowly settled after Michael stormed out, but the echo of his words still lingered in the air like smoke after fire. Sandra stood beside Keanu on the stage, her body trembling, her heart still racing from the weight of the moment. She had chosen love, but she knew that her choice had created cracks in someone else's heart. Keanu looked at her gently, his hand close to hers, but not forcing touch. "Are you all right?" he whispered softly. Sandra nodded, though her tears still rolled down her cheeks. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I feel lighter than I have in years, like I finally stopped hiding from myself." The audience clapped again, moved by her words. Many wiped their eyes, realizing they were not only witnessing a love story, but also the courage it takes to face truth in front of the world. The host finally stepped forward, trying to calm the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice slightly shaking, "tonight has been unlike any other. We came here to honor kindness, and perhaps in its purest form, we have witnessed it through honesty and love." The crowd cheered once more, but beneath the cheers there was a quiet unease. Everyone felt it. Michael's storm was not over. Later that night, when the event ended, Keanu and Sandra walked out through a side door to avoid the large crowd still gathered outside. The city lights glowed softly, and the cool night breeze brushed against their faces. Sandra leaned against the wall for a moment, closing her eyes, trying to steady her breath. Keanu watched her with concern. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore," he said. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. "I'm scared, Keanu. Not of loving you, but of what comes next. Michael, he won't just disappear. I saw it in his eyes. He's hurt, and hurt people can do dangerous things." Keanu nodded slowly. "You're right, but whatever storm comes, we will face it together." His calm words gave her strength. She smiled faintly, though her eyes were still wet. "Together," she repeated, as if promising herself as much as she promised him. The two of them began, walking toward the car, waiting at the curb. But just as they reached it, a shadow moved in the distance. Sandra froze. A man stood across the street, half hidden in the dim light. Even in the shadows, she knew who it was. "Michael," she whispered. Keanu turned his head, his eyes narrowing slightly, though he did not move closer. Michael stood still, his face unreadable. The street was quiet, and his presence made the air feel heavier, as if the night itself was holding its breath. He finally spoke, his voice low but sharp enough to cut the silence. "So it's true. You've chosen him." Sandra swallowed hard. "Michael, please, don't do this." Michael stepped forward, his eyes shining with pain. "You think this is over? No. This is only the beginning. You may stand beside him now, but one day you'll see. He'll break your heart, and when he does, I'll be the one left to pick up the pieces." Keanu's face remained calm, but his voice carried strength. "Michael, I will never claim perfection. I am not without flaws. But I know what love means to me, and it means putting her before my pride, before my fears. I will not let her carry pain alone. If you cared for her truly, you would let her find happiness, even if it isn't with you." Michael laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You sound noble, but words are easy. I don't believe you." Sandra stepped forward, tears still fresh in her eyes. "Then believe me, Michael, I am choosing him. Not because I think he is perfect, but because he makes me feel safe in my truth. Please, let go before your anger destroys you." For a moment, Michael's face softened. His eyes glistened with tears, his lips trembled. But then, his jaw tightened again, and his anger returned like a storm rolling back over the horizon. "You'll regret this," he muttered. Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows of the street. Sandra's shoulders sagged with relief and sorrow. She whispered, "He won't stop. I know he won't." Keanu gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll prepare. Storms may come, but they can never stop love that is true." The words comforted her, but deep down, she knew danger still lingered. The days that followed were filled with whispers in the media. Headlines spread across the world. Keanu Reeves confesses love for Sandra Bullock in front of everyone. Photographs from the event went viral. Clips of Keanu's words filled social media, and millions debated whether this was courage, recklessness, or destiny. Sandra stayed quiet, choosing not to respond to the chaos. Keanu did the same, his calm silence only adding to the mystery. But behind closed doors, their hearts were no longer silent. They spent hours talking, laughing, remembering their journey, and imagining a future where they no longer had to hide what they felt. Yet even in those moments of peace, Sandra could not shake the memory of Michael's eyes. And then, one evening, as they sat together in a quiet cafe tucked away from the city, a letter was slipped under their table. Sandra frowned, picking it up. The envelope had no name, but her heart already knew who it was from. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sentence, written in hurried, heavy handwriting. "You cannot hide forever. I will return when you least expect it." Sandra's breath caught. She showed the letter to Keanu, her eyes wide with fear. Keanu read it silently, then folded it gently and placed it on the table. His face was calm, but his voice was steady with promise. "Then let him return. When he does, he will see that love is stronger than fear." But even as he spoke, Sandra could not ignore the chill that swept through her heart, because she knew the storm was not over. It was only beginning. When love stands unbroken, the letter shook Sandra to her core. The words, written in Michael's familiar hand, felt less like a warning and more like a shadow creeping into her life. She tried to steady herself, but fear whispered in her mind. Keanu watched her quietly, his calm presence like a shield against the storm. "Don't let fear steal this moment from us," he said softly, touching her hand. "Fear is loud, but love is stronger." She nodded, though her heart was heavy. Together they left the cafe, their steps steady, but their minds clouded with questions. What did Michael mean by, "I will return when you least expect it"? How far would his anger go? Days passed, and whispers in the media only grew louder. Everywhere they went, eyes followed them. Some cheered them, some judged them, and some simply watched in silence. But no matter what the world said, Keanu and Sandra stayed close, finding strength in each other. But one evening, as the sun dipped, low and painted the sky with shades of fire, their peace was broken. They were invited to a private charity gala, an event meant to bring hope and light to those in need. Keanu and Sandra agreed to attend together, knowing their presence would inspire others. The hall was filled with soft music, warm laughter, and the gentle clinking of glasses. For a while, it felt safe, until the doors at the far end opened, a man stepped inside, and the air shifted. Conversations hushed, music softened, and people turned to look. It was Michael. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with something darker than before. He walked slowly, each step echoing like thunder. Sandra's breath caught. Keanu's hand tightened around hers, steadying her. Michael stopped in the center of the hall, his voice cutting through the silence. "So here you are, smiling, pretending, as if love has erased the truth. But love built on weakness will not last," the crowd murmured nervously. The organizers moved closer, ready to call security. But Keanu raised his hand. "Let him speak," he said calmly. Michael's jaw tightened. "You think you've won, Keanu? You think by standing here with her you've taken everything from me, but I know you. I know you will fail her." Keanu looked at him with compassion instead of anger. "Maybe I will fail at times. Maybe I will stumble. But love isn't about never falling. It's about choosing to rise together. I will not walk away, Michael. Not from her. Not from what we share." The hall grew still. Keanu's words reached everyone, sinking into their hearts like a quiet truth. Sandra stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "Michael, please. I never wanted to hurt you. I cared for you as a friend, but I cannot love you the way you want me to. I love Keanu, and that is my truth." Her confession rang through the hall like a bell. Michael's eyes filled with tears, but behind them, anger flickered. "You'll regret this," he whispered again, his voice breaking. But then something unexpected happened. An elderly man in the audience stood up, his voice firm yet gentle. "Young man, regret does not come from loving the wrong person. Regret comes from not loving at all. Do not let bitterness chain your life." Others joined. People nodded, some clapped softly. The hall became filled with voices of reason, kindness, and truth. Michael looked around, his chest heaving. He saw faces that once watched him with sympathy, now looking at him with sorrow. His hands shook. Tears spilled down his cheeks. For the first time, his anger cracked, revealing the brokenness beneath. Sandra stepped closer, her eyes soft with compassion. "Let go, Michael. Don't destroy yourself with this fight. Love is not about possession. It's about freedom." Her words struck him harder than any blade. He covered his face with his hands, his body trembling. For a long moment, the hall was silent except for his sobs. Finally, he dropped his hands. His eyes were red, his face pale. I can't watch this anymore," he whispered, and with heavy steps, he turned and walked away. This time, he did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply disappeared into the night. The hall remained silent, the weight of his absence pressing heavily on every soul. Keanu turned to Sandra, his eyes filled with both sorrow and relief. "Sometimes love means letting go of the storms that follow us," he said softly. She leaned into him, her voice breaking. "And sometimes love means holding on to the one who stays." The hall erupted into applause, not for drama, not for spectacle, but for truth. People clapped with tears in their eyes, moved by the power of vulnerability, kindness, and courage. Keanu and Sandra stood hand in hand, their hearts no longer bound by silence or fear. They had chosen each other, and though storms had threatened, they stood unbroken. As the night drew to a close, the audience left with something more than they came for. They came for an event, but they left with a story of love, humility, and resilience. And for Keanu and Sandra, it was not the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter written not in silence, but in truth.